Someone is obsessed with you for reasons that are more disturbing than flattering, rooted not in who you are, but in a hidden part of their psyche you accidentally awakened. You haven't just sparked attraction. You've stepped into a repressed corner of their unconscious that they've kept buried for years. While you believe love is built on shared values, this obsession is born from a terrifying depth. You made them feel seen in a way that disrupted their internal structure, turning you into a mirror for truths they were never meant to face. This profound recognition has created a violent, unbreakable attachment that goes far beyond simple liking. By existing in a way they couldn't categorize or control, you shattered the protective walls they built to hide their deepest needs. Their longing is now a dangerous mix of fear and projection. Because you didn't just attract them, you destabilized their entire inner world. To their unconscious mind, this disruption felt like destiny, making you a powerful symbol of an answer to a void they cannot even name. They no longer see you as an ordinary person, but as the only shield against the emptiness you uncovered. Detaching from you would force them to confront the exact parts of themselves they have spent a stents. Trite. Their mind resists this confrontation with every possible defense, causing them to cling to you, even when it results in confusion and pain. They are not in love with you in the traditional sense. They are trapped in the awakening you caused, and they will hold on tightly to avoid the terror of facing themselves alone. You didn't just awaken something beautiful. You unearthed something raw and unstable. Repressed desires don't surface gently. They erupt, blurring boundaries and creating an emotional intensity that feels real but isn't. Rooted in reality, you can sense this in the heavy tension of their gaze and their irrational reactions. They don't understand their own behavior because it isn't happening in their conscious mind. It is taking place in a hidden layer where logic fails and love is indistinguishable from terror. This internal conflict explains their maddening inconsistency. They are caught in an unconscious loop where intense desire is immediately followed by a panicked retreat. The moment they feel too close, their old defenses whisper that you are dangerous, forcing them to pull away to protect the parts of themselves they aren't ready to face. You are now caught in this high-charged energy, a connection that feels as if it is physically pulling something out of you as well. This wasn't an accident. There was a specific moment of recognition where their deep interior recognized you as something beyond a person. This had nothing to do with your personality and everything to do with what you represent. Symbolically, you are the answer to something they have been simultaneously seeking and avoiding for years. Until you grasp what you represent in their unconscious world, the intensity and confusion of this bond will remain impossible to define. They tried to dismiss these feelings as a passing fascination, but time has only fed the obsession. What they are experiencing isn't a surface attraction that fades. It is a manifestation of unresolved desires the unconscious mind has been collecting for a lifetime. Once these forces are awakened, they refuse to go back to sleep. They will continue to grow and demand satisfaction, eventually forcing a confrontation that neither of you can avoid forever. You arrived in their life not as an ordinary person, but as a psychological key that unlocked feelings they spent years trying to suppress. Once the unconscious mind is activated this way, it takes control in subtle, absolute ways. True obsession rarely looks loud. It often hides behind a mask of restraint and silence. The harder they push these feelings down, the more powerful they become, forcing them to spend hours analyzing every detail of your existence because they are physically unable to stop the process. To their unconscious, you have become a symbol for something lost or something they were told they never deserved. This creates an unbearable tension. Loving you forces a confrontation with their own internal contradictions. While one part of them craves closeness, another part resists with equal force to protect old wounds. This conflict isn't about you. It's about the terrifying truths they've avoided, which now leak out as mixed signals and emotional whiplash. They aren't confused about you. They are overwhelmed by a part of themselves that operates on raw emotion and buried memories. This hidden self is now asking why this connection feels so familiar, yet so frightening, causing their internal stability to fracture. They create distance, not because they want to leave, but because they are desperately trying to regain control. They believe stepping back will quiet the storm, unaware that the chaos you triggered cannot be settled by distance alone. They believe space will eventually bring clearer thinking, and that enough time will naturally weaken the powerful attachment. But real unconscious attachment does not die from distance or time apart. Instead, distance tends to intensify the attachment even more strongly. When someone is absent, reality fades away and gets replaced by rich imagination. Imagination is the perfect environment where obsession can grow freely without any limits, holding it back. At this stage, you are no longer simply another person who exists in their daily life. You have transformed into an image, a mental projection filled with everything they cannot completely understand or control. Projections like this become extremely powerful because they have no natural boundaries or limits. They continue to grow larger. They evolve over time, and they become more perfect, more meaningful, and more necessary in the person's mind. This makes it almost impossible for them to break free from the attachment easily. They are no longer connected to the real version of you that exists in daily life. They have become deeply attached instead to the version of you that now lives inside their own mind. That mental version feels almost impossible for them to replace with anyone else. They also struggle to trust the strength of their own feelings toward you. They question how quickly everything developed and how deeply it seems to affect their daily thoughts and emotions. Anything that feels this powerful must carry some hidden cost, according to their inner skeptics. So the psyche creates resistance, doubt, and waves of fear to protect them from what the feeling might eventually demand. If they ever fully accepted the true depth of what they feel for you, they would be forced to face every suppressed desire, every old unresolved wound, and every hidden truth they have carried for years. The mind does not willingly choose to face such things without a serious struggle, so they remain stuck in the uncomfortable middle ground for as long as possible. They feel pulled strongly in two opposite directions at the same time. They want you badly, yet they also resist you with equal strength. They think about you constantly, but then actively avoid situations where they might see you. They feel everything intensely inside, but express almost nothing outwardly. This ongoing tension does not simply disappear on its own with time. It builds up slowly and quietly until it reaches a breaking point where something finally has to give way. The question that should disturb you most is what will happen when that built-up tension finally becomes too much for them to contain any longer. The human psyche cannot hold such a high level of inner contradiction forever without some kind of release. Eventually, the structure breaks in some way. When it breaks, the outcome is not always what anyone expects to see happening. Sometimes it leads to a sudden honest confession of feelings. Other times, it results in complete emotional withdrawal. In some cases, it produces actions that look irrational or even self-destructive from the start. outside. When the unconscious mind finally takes full control, logic loses all importance, and raw emotion becomes the only guiding law. That particular moment changes everything in the relationship dynamic. It is the point where they can no longer pretend these feelings are casual or unimportant. They are forced instead to face the true nature of what has been growing inside them all along. That decisive moment is approaching, whether they feel ready for it or not. What you originally triggered inside them is not a temporary passing emotion that will fade naturally. It runs much deeper than surface attraction and cannot be ignored or wished away easily. It is something that continues to demand some form of resolution, no matter how hard they try to avoid it. Resolution of this kind always comes with a real personal cost attached to it. The main question becomes, what exactly are they willing to lose in order to avoid facing their true feelings for you? At some point, their mind stops trying to negotiate with these emotions, because suppression eventually reaches its natural limits. What they feel for you has already gone well beyond those limits. You can often sense the heavy, almost suffocating tension that hangs in the silence between your interactions. That tension does not simply vanish into thin air. It waits patiently because the inner process happening inside them has become unstable and continues building pressure. Pressure inside the human psyche always searches for some kind of release eventually. But that release does not always arrive in the form of peaceful clarity or understanding. Sometimes it arrives instead as a sudden emotional collapse that catches everyone by surprise. This stage becomes almost unbearable for the person experiencing it. The situation is no longer simple attraction or mild curiosity that can be managed. It has turned into a direct confrontation with hidden parts of themselves they avoided for many free. These parts were shaped by old emotional wounds, past rejections, and limiting beliefs. Those old beliefs used to whisper messages like, "You are not enough," or "You are too much to be loved safely." Then you appeared in their life, and without any effort on your part, you quietly contradicted every single one of those old negative beliefs. The psyche, however, does not welcome contradictions without putting up a strong fight. It resists them, it argues against them, and it often distorts reality to make the contradiction less threatening. Accepting the truth about you would require them to rewrite large parts of what they believe about their own worth and identity. That kind of internal rewriting is never a gentle or easy process to go through. It feels violent and disruptive on the inside, even if nothing dramatic shows on the surface. Instead of healing smoothly around the new feelings, they often fracture internally around them. One part of their mind moves eagerly closer to you, craving real connection and the powerful feeling of finally being truly seen and understood. Another part pulls back with matching strength, whispering warnings they only half understand. It says, "This situation is not safe. This will eventually cause pain," or "This will expose too much of who they really are underneath." The closer they allow themselves to feel toward you, the more exposed and vulnerable they become inside their own mind. That kind of exposure feels like serious danger to the unconscious part of the psyche. It is not just ordinary emotional risk, but something closer to existential threat. You are not merely someone they happen to like or find interesting anymore. You have become a living threat to the internal structure they built carefully just to survive daily life. Survival identities like that do not dissolve or change without putting up an aggressive defense. They fight back suddenly and sometimes in destructive ways that surprise even the person themselves. To protect themselves, they begin creating convenient stories and explanations, about why this connection cannot be as meaningful as it feels. They tell themselves it is probably temporary, it might not be real, or they are simply overthinking normal attraction. But they are not genuinely trying to understand the situation with clear eyes. What they are really attempting is to contain and control the overwhelming force they feel rising inside. Understanding it fully would mean admitting that this connection is very real and far deeper than anything else they have known before in their life. No matter how hard they try to rationalize and explain it away, their body and subconscious refuse to cooperate with the denial. The powerful pull toward you does not grow weaker with time or distance. It actually intensifies in quiet and relentless ways, as if some inner voice keeps insisting that this matters deeply. This connection is important, and it cannot be ignored forever without consequences. Ignoring these strong feelings begins to take a real toll on them, emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically. Unexpressed emotions never truly disappear into nothing. They change form and transform into restlessness, constant anxiety, or that nagging sense that something essential is missing from life. Even when everything else appears fine on the surface, you slowly become the central focus of that uncomfortable missing feeling. This happens not because they consciously want you to occupy that position, but because their new psyche has now linked you tightly to something essential that nothing and no one else can easily replace. Small cracks in their control start appearing more frequently at this stage. There are moments when their usual restraint falters, and they almost reveal how deep the feelings truly run. They come close to saying something important, or letting you glimpse the real intensity behind their eyes. But then they pull back even harder than before, out of fresh fear. They become scared of their own emotions, scared of the depth of what they feel, and scared of how little actual control they possess over the situation. This pattern creates a repeating cycle that grows increasingly unstable with each turn. The closer they allow themselves to move toward you, the more intense their panic becomes afterward. The more forcefully they pull away, the stronger and more demanding the original feeling grows in response. Eventually, this unstable cycle begins to break them down from the inside, even if they still look mostly composed and functional to the outside world. Internally, however, real chaos is taking place because you have created a difficult psychological paradox they cannot solve through normal thinking. They want you badly, but wanting you also feels threatening to their sense of safety. They feel genuinely connected to you, yet real connection always requires some level of vulnerability that their defenses were specifically built to prevent. They now exist in a painful space between strong desire and deep fear, between emerging truth and old denial, and between wanting to move forward and feeling the urge to run away completely. This situation involves much more than simple emotional tension that comes and goes. It creates a deeper identity tension that strikes at the core of who they believe themselves to pass. Moving toward you would require them to become someone new, more open, more exposed, and more honest than they have ever allowed themselves to be. That newer version of themselves feels unfamiliar, unstable, and even dangerous to their old sense of self. Moving away from you, however, does not provide real escape either. They would still carry the feeling with them everywhere. It follows quietly and persistently, turning into regret and longing over time. It raises the constant painful question of what might have happened if they had allowed something real to develop instead of running from it. That lingering question is what slowly begins to break them apart from within. There is suddenly no completely safe option left for them to choose. They face two painful paths with no easy middle ground available. They can choose to face what they truly feel, or they can spend the rest of their energy trying to forget the entire experience. Forgetting, however, proves much harder than they ever expected it would be. You have stopped being just another passing memory in their mind. You have become firmly embedded in their unconscious as a living symbol, a powerful trigger, and a constant reminder of something important they still cannot fully name or understand. The harder they try to push the feelings down, the more often those same feelings resurface unexpectedly. They appear in dreams, during random thoughts, or in quiet moments of silence, when everything else fades into the background and only the memory of you remains strong. The internal pressure keeps building toward its highest point, because the human psyche can only tolerate so much inner contradiction before it demands some kind of final resolution. Resolution does not always arrive in a gentle or controlled manner. Sometimes it comes suddenly as a breaking point, where everything they have been holding back finally spills out in an uncontrolled, unfiltered, and unavoidable rush of emotion. Right before that breaking point arrives, there is often a strange, tense moment of inner silence. It is not a peaceful or calm silence, but a heavy, suffocating stillness, as if something deep inside has finally stopped pretending everything is normal. That is when the truth begins to rise up unfiltered, unprotected, and impossible to ignore any longer. At that stage, running away no longer feels like a real option. They have already tried creating distance, using distractions, and convincing themselves the feelings were not genuine. But reality refuses to disappear simply because it feels inconvenient or scary at the time. What they feel for you has now become completely undeniable, even to themselves. They finally understand that the real issue was never about learning to control or manage their fool successfully. The deeper challenge has always been about confronting what those powerful feelings are, revealing about their own inner world. What those feelings reveal tends to terrify them when they look closely. You did not simply cause them to fall in love in an ordinary romantic way. You exposed the hidden part of them that has been quietly starving for real connection, for genuine validation, and for something truly authentic in their life. This is the moment when their old protective illusions finally begin to collapse completely. They can no longer hide safely behind cold logic or casual explanations. They cannot continue pretending it is nothing more than simple physical attraction or temporary interest. They are forced to face the haunting question that has been living inside them for some time now. Why this particular person? And why does the connection feel like something they have been unconsciously waiting for, without ever realizing it consciously? The answer to that question is neither simple nor comfortable, nor entirely based on rational thinking. What they feel for you connects directly to something important that remained unfinished in their past experiences. It links to emotional material they buried so deeply over time that they almost convinced themselves it no longer existed at all. But the unconscious mind possesses a perfect memory for such things. It patiently waits for the right mirror to appear, and in this case, you became exactly that, mirror for them. The realization that hits them hardest is that you did not only reflect who they currently are in mere daily life. You also reflected a version of who they could have become if they had made different choices. along the way. That particular realization cuts deeper than almost anything else they have faced before. Loving you now involves more than simply wanting to be close to you. It also means grieving for a version of themselves that they never allowed to exist fully in the first. That lost version was more open, less afraid, and willing to stay present when something real and meaningful finally appeared. Every moment they spend actively avoiding you now begins to feel like a quiet betrayal of that more authentic version of themselves. Every moment they move closer to you feels instead like stepping into unknown territory that they do not yet know how to control or navigate safely. They slowly realize there is no longer any completely safe path available. There is no middle ground here. This process will permanently change them. They face a choice where every direction involves a profound loss. Walking away means losing you and the version of themselves they glimpsed through this connection. A choice that will eventually harden into a lifelong, unshakable regret. Moving toward you, however, requires them to surrender the control and the carefully constructed identity that has kept them feeling safe. To their psyche, losing this control feels like losing everything, marking the breaking point where all old defenses finally collapse. The rationalizations have failed, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth. They are being fundamentally transformed. This isn't a gentle evolution. It is a destruction of old patterns and false beliefs. The situation feels overwhelming because it was never meant to be casual. It was designed to create lasting change. They didn't choose to feel this way, but they must now choose what to do with the feelings. A decision that will define their future and dictate whether they live authentically or in the too shadow of what could have been. You have become the turning point, the fracture in their old identity, and the doorway to their hidden self. Now that this door is open, it can never be fully closed. No matter how hard they fight to return to who they used to be, the illusions are broken, and the only options left are to step into the unknown or retreat with the heavy weight of regret. Both paths carry a high cost, but deep down, they already know which one leads toward the truth, even if they are terrified to take the first step.